We are good.
There we are. Hello.
Hello.
It's been forever. Oh,
Yeah.
good. My voice is breaking already, and we're just starting. That's fantastic. We had travel and sickness, and I don't know, recently, even like internet stuff. Like, it just seems like the last few months have been a challenge, but I'm glad that we're back and we're here. And oh my gosh, your hair is long.
Yeah, my hair is getting pretty long, so I've been waiting because I know we're going to be going, out in a few months now, right? To be out together in the UK. So I was like, okay, well, I don't want to get like a haircut too far out so then it is too long while I'm out there. So let me just try and like make it as long as I can, and then I'll get a nice cut right before I go out there.
I was thinking if the opportunity arose, I'm not really sure of the logistics and the internet can be iffy and all those things, but it would be kind of cool to do one together. Like
Yeah,
we're in the same physical space
yeah, that would be pretty fun,
from England. That would be
right?
kind of cool. The time of it would be just a wacko time of day, I'm sure, for people who join us live, but I don't know, that might be kind of fun. So we'll keep that as a possible idea if we can fit it in.
Yeah, that would be really cool. That's a good idea.
And it's funny because I'm thinking, but how would we do that logistically? We'd probably still have to be on two different computers. Like,
Maybe
I don't know. You'd have to
you could probably
sit
just use one and like the webcam would
close.
like capture us both. You just zoom it out kind of thing.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll figure it out. But
Yeah,
that would be fun since we're not typically in the same physical location.
yeah,
So
exactly.
I know we're talking about other things today, but I wanted to talk just for a moment about this interesting um, I don't even know, discovery. That doesn't seem like the right word that I've made recently. So I've had a LinkedIn for many years,
Hmm.
and for most of those years, I haven't been active at all. Like I might peek at every once in a while, or if I get an email that says that, there's some activity or something that I would look at it. But for the most part, LinkedIn really hasn't been a focus of mine
Right.
until I'd say the last, I don't know, 10 or so months. And I found a couple of things. One is if you follow, and I'm going to put air quotes, the right people, whatever that means, I don't even know how to define that. That's different for everybody. It depends on what you're looking for, it depends on so many things. But I'm going to say the right people are the people who either post things that are aligned with your viewpoint, your interest, your whatever, or they're not, and they challenge you and give other perspectives and things to think about. And for me, I have cultivated what I think is a really amazing group of people who do both of those things and also host a lot of really great research and articles,
Hmm.
things that maybe I wouldn't come across otherwise. And I've connected with a lot of like-minded people in the digital play therapy realm.
Hmm.
Um, I I noticed that there's a group that is not in the play therapy world at all. And I mean, they are, but they don't identify that way, I guess. It's more accurate. What they're doing certainly could fit into play therapy. I'm not sure if the theoretical foundations and the approach is necessarily the same. I don't know enough yet, is what I'm going to say. But there's a man out of Italy who has started something called video game therapy,
Hmm.
and it incorporates. I would say it's kind of a mixture. It's a mixture of a number of things, not everything, a number of things from digital play therapy, and geek therapy.
Hmm.
And so they have the component, which is the video games, but they also have the component that is um, characters and comic book lore and all of that. And they had a summit yesterday, and it was almost all in Italian. So I had to watch the translation that Zoom, provides, and there were times when it was so off. Um, there were some times when it actually put in really inappropriate words, and I was like, I do not think this person said that word, and then it would fix it and then come back. But the interesting thing was to see this completely separate, different group of people growing and talking about play and talking about how powerful play is. And I'm trying to remember what the name of the event even was, and if I can find it quickly without losing what I'm saying, I'll do that. Excuse me, but it's growing.
Hmm.
And it's really fascinating to find people who had nothing to do with each other still coming to the same or similar places.
Right.
And I'm working hard to try to connect with them. And I don't know what their view on that is. Like, am I am I trying to compete or something like that? And I'm hoping that that's not the view. I hope that they
Right.
recognize that I'm trying to come together with like minds because I think we could join and be that much more powerful. But apparently, his name is Francesco Bocci, Bocci,
Hmm.
and apparently he founded it in 2019. And interesting, he has um, a trademark symbol, a registered trademark symbol after video game therapy. And I'm like, how did he trademark that? Because I tried to trademark digital play therapy and they said it was too generic
Yeah.
and they,
Interesting.
they wouldn't let me. So I thought that was really interesting. But um, the symposium was called The Power of Play.
Mm.
And I'm thinking, how often do we talk about that in play therapy, the power of
Hmm.
play? And so and obviously in many different ways in play therapy, we're talking about that. But it was really, really interesting. Some good work that's being done around the world. So I just wanted to bring people's attention to that if they're interested in expanding out and connecting with people on an international level in this realm.
Yeah, no, I think that it's like surprising, but it's also not surprising, when we like it's I love what they're doing. But the part that's not surprising to me is just like, is it so much different from like when you look at the generics of it and just like the cycles throughout time, like we've used stories, we've used, visuals, we've used auditory, things of that nature for enhancing, emotional connections to stories or narratives for us. And now the next step is moving towards digital, just like adapting to what is current for us. So it's not surprising in that aspect, but it's also still surprising that, like this is still, something that we are happy to see that is coming up, but something that is still sitting there for all of us to think like, duh.
Right, right. No, absolutely. And it was funny because I was looking at there was a paper that was published by this group, or at least three people from the group, published in 2023, and it's talking all about video game therapy and whatnot. And I want to be really clear in what I'm about to say because this is not a should have statement that
Mm.
I'm making. I have written quite a few things in this area, and nothing, there was not one citation from any of the works I've done, and It's been, I don't know how many books I've written and chapters I've written. So my point of that is not should haves. My point is how segmented
Yep.
it is that they're doing this work and it took me a while to find them, and I'm doing the work that I'm doing and you're doing the work, we're doing this Twitch stream all these years, and it's probably has to do with different namings. So like we're digital play therapy and they're video game therapy, so there's no video game in mine and there's
Yeah.
no digital play in theirs, right? And so it's probably that, it's probably language.
Yeah.
And and so to me, it was such a marker of the segmentation and the fragmentation that is probably, this is just one other group. I'm sure there are others
Yeah.
who, I know there are other practitioners, don't get me wrong. They're all over the world. We know that. But I'm saying there are probably others who are even more organized about it.
Hmm.
And how important for us to come together so that we can know what each other's doing and build on each other's and support each other and all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I think it would be pretty surprising to the naysayers to recognize and realize how many people out there are working with and recognizing the power of these tools, whatever name you want to give it, in therapy.
Yeah. It's definitely a good point. And I think it's one of those things too where I think you and I had presented on just how many people actually play a video game daily, just like globally, the population. And you would
Yeah.
think that that statistic itself would have been something that, our field as a whole would have recognized, like, okay, wow, like if they're engaging with this and there has to be something there, or at least even if you don't believe in it, you should have, been able to say, okay, I need to look into this further because obviously it's a huge part of basically everyone's life.
Mhm.
So I should understand it, the ins and outs and everything, whether my opinion of it is great or not great, or I don't know, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And as we've said, I don't know, for so long, it seems like we've talked about the importance as a therapist actually with your client, but also as a therapist in this field,
Right.
to be open, to
Yep.
be accepting of what is brought into the room. And so many times, what's brought into the room with a digital native is something of digital nature, some sort of interest, some game they play, something they do, and it doesn't have to be straight video games. It could be they're creating music.
Right.
They like to write stories. They do art. They use Procreate or some other app or program and they do amazing art, or in VR.
Right.
The the art that people have done in Tilt Brush is just mind blowing. If you look it up, anybody looks it up and they just Tilt Brush art and then you find examples of it. It's I don't have that kind of talent whatsoever. Mine looks like a third grader, maybe second grader drew it. It's bad. But whatever that is that someone brings in the room, I think is important for us to understand and honor. And this is a big piece of it. So I'm saying the same thing we say all the time, but
No, it's a really good point because even like you said, not even just like video games in itself, but all digital mediums. Like yesterday, I was having this kind of experience just watching this short little clip that someone had put of, and I think the Oculus used to have it. At least someone in the comments said like, "This is one of my favorite things that Oculus had before Facebook bought it, and then they deleted the free app that you can use." But it was a clip from the space station, and someone was outside, just kind of like connected to it and looking down at the Earth and just kind of watching the Earth just sit there and spin, and just like one, I was just amazed at how fast it was spinning. Um, just based on like you could see it looks like they're kind of hovering where like the ocean would be, and then all of a sudden in like 20 seconds like it's rotated so much that they're already over so much land already. And just like the feeling that I had of just like, wow, this is like so many things were coming up. Like, wow, it really puts a lot of things into perspective. It really, I think, grounds you to kind of be able to see, like, that like we are like in a lot of ways so small in such a large world, and how like there's a lot of appreciation and humbleness that comes along, and just to be able to have those kind of thoughts be spurned up from watching this like 20-second clip of someone hanging space station, like
Yeah.
was just mind blowing. And I can't, at least for me, I'm not gonna say like it's a generic thing, but I don't think I would ever get to that point trying to imagine something like that or creating a physical story, as I'm writing it down. I mean, my imagination is pretty broad, but I would say like just to sit there in something like that. And I can only imagine what that experience would be like in VR with what someone was sharing. So,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Like what we've talked about so many times is that immersion, and the term that is used is psychological presence,
mhm.
um, where you're, for all intents and purposes, your whole self believes that you're in that environment.
Yep.
And when that happens, it's, for lack of a more technical process, just for the sake of our conversation, it's opening new doors, new new ways to even perceive and to process that information,
Hmm.
so that our perspectives can broaden. And it does bring up those questions like you were just talking about, in a whole different way at times, because the stimulus is so different,
Right.
and the perspective, like we can intellectually imagine what it might be like to be out in space and looking down at the earth and watching it rotate. Whether or not we're accurate in that, how do we know? Whether or not um, our imagination will elicit those kinds of responses, I question whether it would, because your brain is working on conjuring up and creating this
Hmm.
imagination in this imagined environment. And so you have all this like engine running, if you will, in your mind to be doing that. Whereas if it's something that you are able to witness and be a part of in a way, and you're watching it happen, and your mind is not having to do the work of that, then it opens doors into other avenues that then you can explore.
Yeah. Which I think is, it's just crazy as you're saying, like just to think about how you can, if someone can go through that just by watching a clip like that, right? And that's,
Yeah.
like a lot of that stuff happens with all kinds of, digital stuff. And I'm sure people felt the same way when they were able to first start looking at like physical photographs, when we started having cameras that were developed and being able to go back and look at memory books and things of that nature. And so I know I keep harping on it, but like I just feel like so much of this is just like history repeating itself in new ways. And so therefore my only point with it is just that it makes natural sense to adapt to, okay, look, this is just X, Y, and Z from 30, 40 years ago, and look how important that was, so this must be important to this generation, or however it may be, in the context of our field, but also in our personal lives as well too.
Right. And you can go back in history and look at the different places, particularly in retrospect, right?
Hmm.
You have a very different vantage point in retrospect than you do when you're actually in the midst of it, and there are benefits to each, um, and there are cons to each. So I think, having done a good amount of research of looking backwards, as I've shared with you guys before, my love of old books and and reading where we've been, and in some ways it's recognizing how much we've changed, in some ways it's recognizing how much we haven't,
Right.
and in some ways it's understanding how we got where we are. Like, for instance, it was pretty profound for me. We talk a lot about Freud and all that, and the beginnings of psychiatry, and And yet, if you go a little further back, you'll recognize that most of the things that Freud was talking about, that was the industry standard at the time. He actually wasn't talking a lot about things that were new or different or
Hmm.
whatever. He just put them together and packaged them in a way that we see as groundbreaking. But if you look at the physicians that he was surrounded by and working with um, and listening to, they were all saying the same things Freud was.
Hmm.
It's really interesting how we look back and say, oh, that was so groundbreaking. And maybe it wasn't. And then there are things that I don't think were thought of as groundbreaking at the time. For instance, I talked about, and I know we're going off, I will talk about the pro, I promise. Um, but for instance, so there was a physician, his last name is Charcot, and he came in and had this really crazy idea that maybe we treat people in asylums well.
Hmm.
Because the idea before, it really depends on the etiology of where people think pathology comes from,
Hmm.
right? And at the time, pathology came from evil spirits. So if you have evil spirits in you and that is why you're behaving this way, we need to get the evil spirit out of you.
Hmm.
And so they did all these things. They tried to starve people, they beat people, they tried all sorts of religious um, can't think of the word
Like rituals.
rituals, yes, things like that. So there were all kinds of approaches that, and most of them, not all of them, but most of them were pretty awful for the
Hmm.
person. Like to be beaten, to be bloodlet, to have leeches on you, like to freeze you, to make you too hot, whatever it is. They were trying to get these evil spirits out of you. And when you think of it in that perspective, that they're trying to do something good for this person to get this thing out, and they're trying to understand how to get this evil spirit out. It makes I shudder to say the word. It makes sense, but within the context, I understand what they were trying to do. Then we had this shift to we need to just lock these people away. We certainly don't want them procreating. We don't want this to continue. It's kind of like how you would treat someone who had leprosy, right?
Right.
You have to get them away from the population. So there were and there were other approaches. I just don't want to go too far into it. So Charcot said came in and said, why don't we treat people well? And then he had an underling, and I'm so sorry at the moment, I'm not remembering his name. I will look that back up. But he worked in the office with Charcot, and he had a whole bunch of ideas of like, let's play music and let's talk to them. Let's ask them what ails them and how they're feeling, and crazy ideas like that. When Charcot left the university, his underling was chastised, and he was basically banished from the whole field. He ended up dying in squalor and all kinds of stuff, and never regained any sort of position. And yet, years later, that's the standard.
Right.
Treat people well, talk to them, ask them what's going on with them, try to help them through those kinds of things. But at the time, it was thought of as anti everything that was happening in the moment and how you might deal with things. So anyway, a long tangent. I'm sorry, but even to go off into history and like just try to see one, where we've been, how we got where we are today, what the perspectives were at the time, and how that flavored or didn't what occurred, what was acceptable, what was not. And I think we can identify moments and cornerstones over time of these kinds of things happening, um, and then look in retrospect and see what that impact really was. And I hope that I live long enough to be able to see that for this period in time, for this. I'll be old. Hopefully I have some wits about me, and I can have all you younger people tell me what's happening. So I'm gonna pass that torch to you, Michael, and say, please, when I'm old, super old, please keep me posted
I'm
on
sure
what.
you'll still be walking around with a big old VR headset on you.
Who knows? So, all right, we'll Plaguey put it into the chat here, knowing what you're doing and why, and absolutely what you're doing and why you're doing it. It's just so fundamental. I'm sure I'm not the one who first started saying that, but I say it all the time. I feel like I have owned it within me anyway, not like industry wide, but within me for sure. Um, segue with the headset on my 90-year-old self. Let's the Apple Pro. Um, have you tried it? Have you had any experiences with it?
No, I haven't been able to.
Okay. I know there are a lot of people like on social media who have gone to the Apple Store
Yeah.
and done a demo there, and then there are some people who purchased it. So I've kind of come in a big circle. Before I just start babbling on as I do, is there anything in particular that you are wondering or?
No, I'm just excited to hear your experience with it, like what you think of where it's at now, maybe what you think that like could be added to it, like in terms of, that would add some big features or just maybe some things that you're excited about, like it potentially coming.
Absolutely. Sure. Yeah, there are definitely there are pros, there are some cons. So the story is that, and I think I mentioned this in a previous stream, but so I knew the day it was launching. I was excited about it, and I like had it up on my phone when it launched the Apple Store, and I was ready to purchase it. And I started thinking, wow, that is a lot of money.
Hmm.
And at the moment, family finances aren't in the most tip-top shape. So I said to myself, I really shouldn't. I want to, and I shouldn't. So I didn't. And then a couple weeks later, I was like, or not even a week, maybe it's a couple days. I can't remember. It wasn't that much longer later. I looked at my phone like, longingly. I wish I could get this thing. And then it showed that if you did it with your Apple Card, it was interest free for a year. So it basically ended up being like $300 a month.
Hmm.
And I thought, well, I can do that. So I went ahead and purchased it. And then I waited and waited and waited because I didn't get in on the first round
Right.
of shippings. I had to wait. So I got it the night before I was leaving for a business trip, which stunk because at like 8:30 at night and I was leaving super early in the morning and I can't do anything with it. I basically
Right.
took it out of the box and went, oh, and charged it. That's pretty much all I could do. So I came back from my trip and then I started setting things up. And for people who are in the Apple ecosystem, they have an iPhone, they have an iPad, they have a MacBook or whatever version of a computer. This is it's not perfect, but it's pretty seamless for
Hmm.
everything to connect. And that's pretty cool because all of a sudden you have access to all the apps, whether they're VR or not. You have access to all of the apps. You can the immersion. There's a little dial on the top that you can set the immersion level. So if for people who know VR, it's like the pass through. So whether or not you see the actual space, your physical space you're in, you can set it to where it's like a beautiful background, or you can set it to where, oh, I see my dog and my computer and my the window and all the things. So that's kind of cool that the dial on there I think is really nice. And at any given moment, you can just make it more or less
Hmm.
of that. And it's not one or the other. It's gradations. So like there is a place in the middle. There's a scene that I had up that was like a winter scene with trees all around me. It was really beautiful. And I could set it so that I could see my physical space and that at the same time.
Right.
It was more opaque. And then you can make it more or less. So the headset itself, for the most part, was comfortable. I really liked the strap.
Mhm.
The weight on the like I couldn't get it set just right to not put more pressure than I wanted on my forehead. And there was another strap that you could put on it that may have solved the problem. So
Mm.
it's not a game killer, if you will. Like I didn't I and I'll explain the direction I'm going in with that in just a moment. So the graphics, the visual, the it was amazing. It was beautiful. The colors, everything was crisp. Like it beautiful. I think they did a phenomenal job. The processor, it was fast, it was responsive. I can see my computer, I can work on it. You can have up to 5 screens going on at once. And for some
Mhm.
people, they wouldn't want that, but for some people, that's great. Like I know for me, even without any of that, I have, even behind my computer right now, I have a large monitor that when I'm writing, I put my resources on there and then I put what I'm
Mhm.
writing on my laptop and I can just go back and forth and keep reading. So although it sounds like ridiculous to some people to have multiple monitors, and that's like you're a hardcore gamer or computer programmer or something. It's not necessarily true because each of those monitors can have something else on them that you're using simultaneously instead
Right.
of having to go back and forth. So I appreciated that. Play Geek is putting things into the chat about the persona. So
Mm.
they have this really cool thing that I think is the best job I've seen ever in creating your avatar. And you take the headset and you put it in different positions around your face.
Mhm.
And then they have you smile and not, and they have you put your eyebrows up and down, and you create your avatar. And it is it moves with you, it talks with you, it smiles with you. It does, like they have recorded the different musculature of your face along with the shape and the features, all that kind of stuff. And I think the main thing that didn't look natural was there was like a flatness to my head.
Mm. Interesting.
And that kind of happens here too in Zoom with a background, you
Mhm.
know, like even right now, because we use a green screen, right? So that we can um, project onto the digital play therapy Twitch stream and have us both there and all that kind of stuff and have the background. And there is like a squish to the hair. And
Mm.
I think that just happens at this point when we're altering our environment in some sort of digital way. But I got onto a Zoom call with Play Geek and used the headset and the persona. And as she was saying, she had no idea I was in the headset until I told her. And it was because the movements, the facial expressions, everything, it matches up what you're saying and your mouth moving, like your eyes moving around, all of it matches. I knew it because if I knew what kind of facial expression I was making, I could see myself on the Zoom,
Mhm.
and it was all matching. So it's pretty spectacular.
Yeah.
Um, Now, there are other sides to that, right? The more realistic we get and the more difficult it is to know what's real and what isn't, which is a lot of the conversation about AI and
Yeah.
videos that are being made. And did someone actually say that? Or was it voice matching and someone, like understood all of those things? I'm just focusing on how freaking cool.
Right. Absolutely.
Um, and all those other things exist. And me sitting here saying this is a bad thing because of all those other things doesn't change the fact that it's happening and it's all over the place. So I'm choosing to recognize that as a society, we have a lot of things to navigate here and to figure out how we what our understanding of real is. I just wrote a chapter for a book on clinical virtual reality and mental health, and that was part of what I was trying to bring up, and I didn't have space to like deep dive into it, which was a bummer, but for me anyway. Um, but how do we know what's real? What does that even mean?
Right.
And that's changing, knowing that this phone is tangible, right? That that is historically one of our definitions of real. Um, it's changing. So it's just cool. They did a good job. They did a really good job in the personas, and I think it's just going to get better and better. And hopefully, they can do something about the head, the head smash. I can imagine people who have, like, I have pretty flat hair. It's just straight and long and flat and sticks to my head. And if it's flat on me, can you imagine people have like, curly hair or something more voluminous?
Hmm.
So I imagine that it would, look less real because their hair would be smushed. Um, Anywho, there were a couple of programs that were already on it. There is a dinosaur experience, and it's very short, but um, really well done. The um, immersive quality of it, and again, the colors, the just the clarity, the optics are fantastic. Uh, I can see the Apple Vision Pro being amazingly impactful in mental health. I can see that there are a lot of things that we talk about with other headsets that you can now do really well in this one. And one of them has to do with that knob for the immersion.
Right.
Um, and because people are like, what if someone feels uncomfortable? Like, I mean, clearly you can just take the headset off, and that can happen with any headset. But in this
True.
one, a turn of that dial, and all of a sudden they're back in the room,
Hmm.
like very quickly. So things like that. I there was quite a process, at least for me, and I consider myself to be pretty digitally savvy, um, to learn because there's no controllers, to learn how to choose things
Yeah.
and how to activate things, and it is a process. What I would say, if anybody's going to try it out, is where the headset fits on your head matters incredibly of how easy or not it is to activate things with your hands,
Mm.
because it's going by your eyes. It does a scan of your eyes. You can even set the headset up so that when you put it on, it scans your eyes and then it recognizes you and opens everything up.
Mm.
You don't have to like log in or do any of that. It just, scans your eyes and recognizes you. I'm not sure how that works when you have multiple users. I
True.
imagine there are just multiple profiles that you put on there, but certainly we would have to think about that with our clients. Um, and and I scan information, which Meta does too. Like Apple's using it in a different way by identifying you to get into your headset, but other headsets do that too. So I'm
Right.
not saying it's unique to Apple. The placement on your face of it lines up in a way so that it's recognizing where you're looking. And when you look at a certain thing, it highlights, and then you can pinch it with your fingers. You just do this, and then it'll activate that.
Mm.
Whether you're moving a window around or closing it or opening something, you can use your 2D apps in it, and then there are also obviously VR programs that are especially for it. So it's limited right now in terms of what you have access to, because the developers are frantically trying to develop specifically for the Apple Pro, and developing for iOS, which essentially is what it is quite a process, as we know from
Hmm.
Virtual Santray, and getting things approved is quite a process, and just so it just takes time. and there will be more and more and more available. I think they are, Apple has been historically much more open to anything in the medical and mental health realm. And
Hmm.
I know I've said that before, and I'll say it again. So one of the things that I think is missing, which was actually I surprised, I shouldn't have been surprised. I don't know, but I kind of was at the meaning of it for myself, I guess, is the lack of controllers.
Mm.
So I was excited about the lack of controllers because when you put someone who is not used to VR into a headset, that can be one of the bottlenecks, if you will, because here's your controller, here are what the buttons mean. It's kind of like when we have a gaming controller, right? Like if someone isn't a gamer, what does all this mean?
Hmm.
What all the buttons mean and everything. So when you have a VR controller, it's the same thing, and there's an adjustment there. And for some people, it's more natural than it is for some other people. So I was kind of excited not to have that. What I hadn't thought through was the lack of haptics.
Yeah.
So for people who don't know VR, haptics is a vibration that happens in the controller in as a response to something else. So like if you touch something or interact with something or there's an explosion, people who are gamers, there's haptics even in these controllers, right? Like something happens
Hmm.
when it vibrates in your hand, and it's a mechanism, like a feedback loop. Your your eyes are seeing it, your body is feeling it, and so we have this feedback loop of further immersion. And I think that that's something that I would find clinically as a loss,
Hmm.
because I think that it reduces in some ways the level of immersion that you can achieve, which is hard for me to say because no controllers, two less things to lose, two less things to break, two less things to charge, two less, it's the idea of it is fantastic, but I do think there's a loss. So I started thinking, oh, I wonder, maybe there could be a ring that people could, but would that be enough of a registering?
Hmm.
If it was just like on one finger or something, or now we're back to gloves and
Hmm.
and and other ways that they've tried to incorporate realistic haptics into VR. So I don't know the answer of it, but I'd say the two things that, well, there are three things that were kind of drawbacks. One is right now, and I don't think that's going to be the case along the way. Right now, there's a lack of programs that we would use clinically available for VR for the Apple Vision Pro. But I know they're coming. I mean, I see
Yep.
companies all the time on my LinkedIn talk about that they're programming for it. So I know they're coming. The next is um, the process that it takes to learn how to choose and activate things with your eyes and with the pinching of your fingers. And the third is the lack of controllers. I feel like I've been talking forever. So what are you thinking?
No, I think that a lot of it sounds really cool. I mean, I just like the idea of even just having your 2D apps being on a larger screen. Like I think historically, if you look at going from, okay, I want to have something bigger on my phone, so I have to use like a big iPad, but then it's like I want a bigger picture, but you can't just have like this gigantic monitor that you're just gonna like lay down wherever you're sitting and run your hand all over the big monitor. Um,
Mhm.
so I actually like that, the idea that you can, kind of put that up on the screen. Um,
And make them bigger and smaller, right? So like,
exactly.
if say I have an article that I want to read and I can expand that and make it huge while I'm typing and see it at the same time, which is
Yeah, it's even
I can't
hard.
do in
Like
reality.
I'm sure you've probably seen on some like articles that you're looking at on your phone, and the text is like just the window of itself is so small, so you have to like zoom in to read like a couple words, zoom back out to then move over to the other side, because if you try and like scroll over to the side while it's mega zoomed in, you might actually like scroll out a diagonal and go down a couple sentences, and you're like, wait a minute, where? So I hate that aspect of it
Yeah,
whenever I'm trying to do that. But even just
right.
like I could think of like some like kind of mini like match three type of cell phone games that I like to play. Like just that just relax me, make me challenge my brain a little bit, that I can play for a few minutes a day. Just the ability to have something like that bigger, and to be able to kind of see okay, hey, if I move that tile there, these tiles will move over here. Sometimes that's like really hard and straining on my eyes to have to like look at my screen. I have a bigger phone than the normal ones that I would say. So it's definitely a bigger picture, but I can only
Mhm.
imagine the amount of eye strain that you would get looking at a smaller screen like that. And so to be able to kind of have that, and then also be able to as you mentioned, have things that you're typing. And I know that it probably sounds foreign for maybe a good amount of people in our field and stuff like that, for having multiple monitors, but I feel like that's the norm now. Almost everyone that I play games with, or grew up with, like they all have at least two monitors. I think two monitors now is becoming even a more minority in a gaming field, because people have three monitors. um, I even have some friends who have five monitors, and they have them like stacked on various different things. uh,
Yep.
any kind of person that you're watching doing any kind of like Twitch streaming, or content creating, they're having multiple monitors. And so I know that that could bring on questions of people saying, are we over simulating people? And it's like, we're way beyond that. When we started having state testing for children at young ages in education, so naturally you're going to have a generation that's growing up that is going to need to have a certain level of stimulation to be able to function. And whether that's good or not, like we're already past that conversation. um, so I think that a lot of people, when you're looking at the idea of especially convenience, if you're traveling somewhere, I mean, I don't think most people are bringing three, four monitors and they're set up for work or things of that nature. I think even if you're someone who travels and you're doing therapy sessions, the ability to have the headset is super nice too, because the sometimes it's hard to find a good area to set up in that's quiet, appropriate, confidential. But you can also put down a laptop to be able to do your session. So to be able to kind of have that where you can just kind of go anywhere with it, and as you were saying, and Play Geek said, like to not be able to know that that person is using their persona is pretty massive. And then also just too, like I think of just like the physical aspect of it. Like I know I mentioned, I really don't like sitting in a chair that often, um, just
Mhm.
because of just back issues and things of that nature. So being able to have a more comfortable chair or area that is appropriate within my office, that I can kind of sit down and throw that headset on and still do my session, and not feel like oh, I've been sitting in a very uncomfortable position for the majority of the day,
Mhm.
is
Yeah.
massive. And people can look at like the pricing of it, and it's finance like you're saying, but like it's kind of like a mattress, right? Like how a lot of people will pay a good amount of money for a good mattress, because you want to sleep well, and you can't put a price on having good sleep, you know what I mean? So like I will always be on the side of like, I want to pay for convenience, comfort, and safety if it means paying more. You know what I mean? And so, and as you mentioned with the apps, I'm sure they're going to look astounding once people are able to finally get them on. And so,
Yeah.
in terms of the haptics, I'm sure Apple will come out with something that like people will start to say. I mean, remember the Apple Pen? Like they came out with that when you could just very easily still like use your finger and everything like that. And so the pin, like they came out, and sounds like a great business idea. Like some people may want controllers or things to have haptics, so I'm sure they'll come up with something.
Right. Right. And it's feedback, right? I
Yeah,
mean, I don't think they'll ever hear my feedback, but there are industry experts and whatever that they listen to, who they employ, who they whatever, that hopefully that's part of the conversation. Obviously, our use of it is is potentially different from other industries. So we'll see where they go with it, and I'm sure there'll be all sorts of accessories and just just all kinds of things. As you said, you look at Apple along the way, and that's how they roll. They're gonna keep doing that, and I think there will be improvements along the way for
Yeah.
sure. Um, so yeah, you said a whole bunch of things. One of the things you were talking about with travel is you not only can have all those screens, but you also have access to all your stuff,
Yeah.
anything that's in the cloud, anything
Absolutely.
that you've saved, like you can just pull it out, do the work. It's a way to have everything in one place.
Right.
You can make phone calls from it. You can do FaceTime. You can do Zoom. You can do the, basically everything and anything, and take it all in one piece, which is really nice. So the other part of this story for me is that what I ended up thinking was at this moment, I am not able to use it clinically.
Right.
I have to learn more and figure out more about, say, the different profiles, all those kinds of things.
Yep.
Um, I want to feel really secure in what I understand about their privacy and all of those kinds of things so that when my client is putting it on, I can be clear with them or their family about what that means, what I know, what I don't know. I do the same thing for Meta. And
Yep.
my conversation is basically, I don't trust any of this
Yeah.
with Meta. I don't. Um, and at the same time, I've opted out of all the things you can opt out
Right.
on the Meta Quest, and I still don't trust it um, in that way. And so that's a really frank conversation. It's not that we can. I want to really highlight this for people in mental health. The point is not to make sure, because how do we ever, but it's not to make sure that anything and everything we're using is private to the nth degree, and we can attest and assure people of that, because
Right.
you can't when they're playing Candy Crush or whatever. I just aged myself incredibly in that, but in I'm sure there are people who are still playing that. uh, but whatever we're doing, our Google searches, our searches on our phone, or whatever, there's information being passed all over the place. And I think the safer way to go is to be conservative and to also learn what you can and understand what you can about certain systems. And then you present that. That's informed consent. Informed consent doesn't mean I guarantee 100% all these things. Informed consent is, this is what I understand. These are the pros. These are the cons. And here's places to get more information for yourself. Do your own due diligence. And these are the reasons why I think this is important to do in a therapeutic setting.
Hmm.
And you allow them, the parents, in the case of a minor, or the client, in the case themselves, to make an informed decision about whether or not they want to move forward with it.
Right.
Our job is to understand as much of that as we possibly can. What does end-to-end encryption mean? Does it have it? Does it not? Where, if they're scanning my eyeballs, where's that information going? What is
Hmm.
it used for? Is it used locally within the headset for identification? No big deal. Is it used elsewhere for something else? What's it used for?
Right.
And is that okay or not? Is it worth it or not? Are the therapeutic benefits worth it or not? And what's the reason we're even doing it? Which goes back to what Plaguey was saying, is know what you're doing and why you're doing it. And then you present that information to your clients and you have a conversation. That's where informed consent comes in. And I think a lot of people get stuck on, well, if I can't assure and I can't be 100% certain of X, Y, and Z, then we can't use it. And that,
Right.
it's simply not true, because we're not even as therapists in the position of being able to assure anybody that kind of thing anyway,
Yeah.
unless it's in our stuff, right? In our office, I can assure someone that I shut the door and I have noisemakers and I have sat out in the waiting room and I've made sure that you can't hear, what's happening in my physical, those kinds of things.
Hmm.
There are things we lock our file cabinets. If anybody still has those, and newer electronic record. I mean, I still have them because for a minor right, you have to keep your records
Yep.
and until they're is it 7 years past of age? I
Right.
don't know. I've never destroyed any of them over 30 years. So I still have things locked up. But so I'm not talking about those kinds of things. I'm talking about other kinds of things, text messages, emails. I use a HIPAA compliant email. Can I 100% assure my client anything about that? I
Right.
can say I did what I'm supposed to do. I can say I believe the company because they're reputable and we signed a BAA, a mutual BAA. Like that's what I can say, but I'm not looking at the ins and outs of their company. Look at what just happened with the insurance thing. I don't know how much you're up on that, Michael, but there was just this huge breach in
Yep.
insurance. And like, so how can we assure anything? We can't. We can say we've done our due diligence, we're doing the best we can, we'll let you know if anything happens. That's what we've been saying in informed consent forever.
Right.
So, anywho, knowing all those things. So, I recognized that I'm not going to use this quite yet with clients,
Hmm.
not only because of the things I just mentioned, but also because of the lack of programs that I would want
Yep.
to use at this point. And I recognize that there are going to be future iterations of this headset. I decided to return it,
Hmm.
which was hard for me because I did really like it for all the reasons we talked about and being able to have all of my stuff right there. And I thought there were so many cool things about it. And I also thought I need this to be different for my use.
Right.
And if a future iteration of this headset is going to be more applicable to my professional use, then I would prefer to have one of those. And I don't want to buy both.
Absolutely. No, I don't blame you.
So it was a hard decision, like I said, because I waited so long. I was so excited about it. And then I see so much potential. I'm still super excited about it. And I just think that was the best decision for resources, for use.
Yep.
So I'm gonna wait until the next one comes out, and then um, hopefully it will meet more of my needs, and then we can have another conversation about it.
Absolutely. No, it was good. I think it was a good breakdown and a good, understanding of the pros and cons, where it's at, what it could benefit from getting more of, and then also just some hope for the future. So, uh, thank you
I
for
think it's
that.
a game changer.
Yeah.
100%. This is not a negative conversation at all, and I
Right.
didn't return it because it was a negative. I just thought it was a prudent decision. And I just have some needs that it's not meeting yet.
Yeah.
But hands down, I think it's a game changer. I think it's fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think that's great. And perfect timing for us, right? So, as sad as it is, to have to go, but we will see you guys again in 2 weeks. I think we're on for that. So, um, yeah, I know that Jess had been traveling, and then also I had gotten sick, and then got better, and then gotten sick again. So hopefully, I'm on the tail end of the second one, and it doesn't come back. So, um, we will see you guys in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you.